Exams are a big part of the undergrad experience. While exams should be designed to evaluate how much students have learned in a course, they are actually more so used to evaluate how much students can memorize from the course. In a previous video, I've provided general tips to help students increase their memorization of course content. However, not everybody learns the same way. And in this video, I'll be providing memorization tips for visual learners or people who like things like that. Hey guys, I'm Mike. I'm an organizational behavior professor at the Ted Rogers School of Management. In weekly videos, I leverage my student and professor experiences to share insights that'll help you better navigate your student life. I generally don't talk about topics learned in the classroom, but learn the hard way throughout university. So if you are in uni or will be soon, hit subscribe, smash the like, make sure the notification tab is on, and check out my weekly videos. In this week's video, I'll be talking about memorization techniques for visual learners. Visual learners, what the heck are they? Well, do you consider Netflix and chill part of your regular physical activity? When you're assembling a piece of IKEA furniture, do you use the instructions or not? When you're playing a new board game, do you like to read the instructions or do you just jump right into the game? If you answered yes to any one of these questions, you are likely a visual learner. By definition, visual learners like to receive information via visual stimuli. Think pictures, words, videos, things of that nature. This type of information gives visual learners a feeling of comfort before they actually conduct a series of tasks. Now, there are a bunch of tests and exams that somebody can take to determine whether you are in fact a visual learner, but to be honest, you probably already know by now whether you're a visual learner or not. And if you are, you're going to want to watch, see what I did there, the rest of these memorization tips. One of my favorite memorization techniques are acronyms. Acronyms are abbreviations using the first letter of a series of words. Typically, the series of words are something you want to memorize, so you're only trying to capture those first letters, form them into a word, so it's easier for you to memorize one word rather than a string of words. Probably the first acronym I ever learned was in grade 7 math class, and that was the word for BEDMAS. Brackets, exponents, division, multiplication, addition, subtraction. Because BEDMAS was so memorable in my mind, I don't think I'll ever forget the proper way to run a math question. Now, the next time you have to remember a key item, you might want to consider creating a memorable visual image. Images are critical to memorization as they tap into visual spatial areas in your brain. So images can be very helpful as they're connecting what you're seeing with visual areas going on in your head. Okay, so for example, if you're trying to remember that the capital of Louisiana is Baton Rouge, then when you're saying those words, remember, try to think of a girl named Louise carrying a red baton. Okay? Because those words are so similar and you're connecting those words with the visual image of a little girl named Louise carrying a red baton, you're more likely to memorize that state capital. The next technique I want to talk about is using a memory palace. Now, I have to admit, this technique does take a little bit of time to get used to, but once you master it, it is incredibly powerful and can seriously increase your memory of course content. So what it involves you visualizing something you're familiar with, such as the layout to a house, and then connecting that with things you want to remember, right? And you're going to be depositing those concepts at different elements of that layout. Okay, so for example, if you want to memorize a grocery list of say apples and eggs, something like that, what I would do is I would visualize myself walking through the layout to my house. I go from the kitchen to the living room. As I'm walking by my kitchen table, I visualize an egg hitting the table and then spilling on the ground. I then walk into the living room and visualize a bushel of apples spilling onto a couch and then rolling on the floor. So that as I'm walking through my house in my mind, I'm like, oh, I need to step over the apple that's rolling on the ground, or I need to clean up the egg that's then spilled on the ground. Because you already know the layout of your house, it'll be easy for you to walk around your house, picking up these different concepts that you've memorized earlier. Visual metaphors can not only help you remember, but can also help you understand. A metaphor is a way of realizing that one concept that you're trying to remember is similar to something you already know. So for example, in my HR class, I always relate HR planning to a bathtub or organizational culture to an iceberg. Because once you make those associations, culture is like an iceberg, you can begin to unpack the similarities between them to remember each of those more nuanced ideas about the concept. So for example, how much of the iceberg is above below the water is similar to the idea that how much culture can you see versus how much culture is not capable of being seen. That's why metaphors, especially the visual ones, can stick with you for years because you are connecting concepts that you're trying to remember to neural structures that are already existing in your brain. Colors capture our attention, unless you're colorblind, I guess, but anyways. So colors work as a bit of a kind of a mental shorthand when you're remembering things. Colors give context to the content you are studying and allow you to process the information more easily. Here are some tips to help you use colors more efficiently when you are remembering content. First, always color code after you've taken the notes and not while you're taking the notes. If you try to do it while you're taking the notes, it's going to completely interrupt the flow of your session, and you're likely to use more colors than are needed, which is just going to get confusing. 2, always use highlighters, colored pens, and different colored sticky notes. The greater variety allows you to organize your ideas using the different means, the different tools, highlighter versus pen versus sticky note, to more efficiently have certain ideas pop off the page. And last, always use a consistent coloring scheme. So for example, use blue to highlight big ideas, green to do definitions, and yellow for examples. Don't overdo it. Don't highlight every single thing on the page, because then you'll just get a bunch of rainbows on the page. There's going to be everything's going to be trying to pop out, which really means nothing's going to be popping out. So don't overdo it. My next memory tip is to draw tables and diagrams, figures, images to help you remember. So my thought is, well, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, isn't it easier to remember just one picture than 1,000 words? Cue cards, flashcards, index cards. There's so many different names for these types of cards. I cannot remember them all. But regardless of what you call them, they can be very helpful when you're actually trying to remember something. But do you remember when you were in grade school and you were trying to memorize a speech and you just simply took these cue cards and wrote the entire speech on the cue card, and then you got up in front of the class to say the speech and you simply just use this little dinky piece of paper to read your speech rather than actually memorize it? Well, that's not actually using cue cards efficiently and effectively in the right way. If you use it effectively, it actually helps you memorize and put that content that's on the cards into your brain. The way I like to use cue cards is I like to have the question or concept on one side so that it prompts you to think about something, but then you have to actually flip over to the other side of the cue card before you actually write the definition or solution to that problem. Now, I like to keep my cue cards simplified, but I've seen other people have really complex cue cards where they divide their solution side into quadrants. They'll have a full-out definition, simplified definition, image, figures, dates, whatever you really want related to that concept. So again, cue cards are super helpful, not just when you write out a full speech on the cue card, but also when you're actually trying to draw and prompt you to remember content that's on the card and put it in your brain for an exam. All right, guys, that's it. That is my video for memorization tips for visual learners. If you found this video helpful or want to hear more tips on how to make your student life more manageable, hit subscribe, smash the like, make sure the notification tab's on, and check out my weekly clips. I'm going to have the next 2 videos are going to be memorization techniques for auditory learners as well as kinesthetic learners. So you're going to want to tune into those too. That's it for me. Bye-bye.